this is Stuart Wilde. I think the reason this book, Silent Power, did so well was that it correctly stated the true nature of one's identity, the etheric. The word etheric comes from a Greek word that means to blaze, like a fire blazes in the grate. It is the bioelectric force field that surrounds each of us. In that field are your true feelings, and it is that field that people respond to consciously and subconsciously, whether negatively or positively. People seek energy with which to survive, so they often look for sources that are oscillating higher than they are. A high-energy person is like the sun, radiating silently for others, helping them feel warm and less threatened by the fragility of life. The etheric is the silent energy all around you that defines what you are. For a long time, the etheric was a rather hazy concept, ill understood. It was marginalized as fringe thinking and set in the concept of the Theosophist writings about the color of the aura. In many ways, the whole thing about the aura was rather gummy and somewhat elitist. If your aura was blue or violet, you were supposed to be an elevated being, and if it was more red or sludge-colored, you were relegated spiritually to the bottom end of things. The etheric is light, and light is colorless. It is only if you pass a beam of light through a prism that you can see its rainbow colors. I'm sure that in the inner worlds the etheric has color, but in our outer world we don't see the color. We see it as fast-moving flashes of energy. And yet, at times you will see speckles of color in it, but not a whole wash of any one particular color, say. For 70 years or so, the teachings about the etheric lay in the realm of speculation. You had to take it on faith, as very few saw the field, and no one could really define it. But now science has caught up, and it has been discovered recently that the field of the etheric, which stretches for several feet around you, is in fact made up of a special particle of light, known as a biophoton. Photons are particles or packets of light, and a biophoton is light generated from a biological source. So basically we would say it is biological light. German researchers who have measured and documented the biophoton say it is invisible to the naked eye because its light is so weak and it easily gets swamped by bright sunlight. But it's not totally invisible, and you can teach yourself to see it. The early esoteric writings were very influenced by the snobbery and elitism of the Victorians. So they said that only avatars and high-level spiritual beings could see the etheric, and that came as a gift of an elevated spiritual status. That's a load of cobblers and not technically correct. You could be Jack the Ripper and still learn to see the etheric. The light is faint, so it is invisible to the cone cells that are in the center of your eye, but the rods of your eye, which are to the side, are very much stronger and more sensitive to light and movement. It's the rods that give you good peripheral vision. It is thought the human eye developed a more sensitive side vision as a defense mechanism eons ago when humans were under threat from wild animals and other predators. The rods can see the etheric, while the cones in the center of your eyes can't see it. So there's a trick to it. You have to glance at the energy field sideways, activating the rods of your eyes. And as you learn to do this, you'll see that all living things are surrounded by the force field of biophotons. You have to make sure the sunshine is not too bright, or that you're not under neon light. For some reason, neon light destroys one's ability to see. It is said that biophotons get their light from the nucleus of the molecules of the DNA in the body's cells, and that may well be the case. But the light is also generated as a byproduct of the electrical activity generated by brainwave activity, and also the electricity of the nervous system and the flow of blood coursing through your veins. In addition to all of that, there is the power created by muscular activity and your overall aliveness. The etheric light, its intensity, is affected by your level of harmony and balance, your minute-by-minute mood, so to speak. I came to see in the early 80s that the etheric is in fact where human feelings are stored. The body-brain mechanism can't experience the complexity of emotions and feelings. It has no complex terms of reference. It is a binary system that operates via a very simple on-off mechanism that signals messages to the brain that translate into the sense of touch, say. The brain experiences everything as incoming electricity, on-off sensations that flow along the body's wiring system that we call the nerves. The brain experiences sensations, but it's in the etheric where human subtle feelings are experienced. Love, hate, bliss, anger, and so forth. Herein lies the key. The etheric is an imprint or map, if you like, of a person's feelings, a complex set of patterns and signals that describe the secret side of our humanity, that part that we often hide away. It tells you what a person really is, what they really amount to, which may be different from what they say they are or how they look. Many a crooked lawyer looks as straight as a die, all togged up in his suit and tie, spouting fine words, but in his etheric feelings you may realize he's a professional liar, a ruthless predator eager to feed off you and your lack of knowledge. Lawyers can't get to heaven. There's a mechanism that prohibits them. That has always rather pleased me. I'd hate to go through the tedious effort of living a pious life only to find a lawyer standing next to me at the pearly gates. Now that really would be lousy karma. Anyway, by reading the etheric, you ought to be able to tell who's a crook and who isn't. Even if you can't as yet see the field of energy, you can definitely feel it. It's just a matter of telling yourself that you have the power to do so. Some people are naturally psychic, but everyone has feelings, and the more you control your ego and process your life, the more sensitive you become to the feelings of others. The trick is to reach out and touch a person's energy from a distance and pull back towards you a particle of those biophotons I spoke of before. Each of those quanta of light will have a holographic entirety of the person you're looking at. Imagine this. You're watching a person walking in the street and they are in a bubble that is blazing all around them. You mentally reach out with your arm and extend it all the way across the street and grab a piece of them and quickly snap your arm back. It's all in the mind's eye, but it is real nonetheless. You will feel something. There will be a predominant feeling and other less prominent feelings, but you can tell if that passing stranger is sad or hurt, or unwell, or in need of reassurance or whatever. The more you do this exercise, the easier it gets. In the end, you don't even bother with seeing your arm going across the road. It becomes just the act of mentally pulling a small part of them towards you. Though the etheric is close to the body, it can jump a long way, and when it does so, it moves very fast. I've often seen it loop across the street or across a large room. You can get whacked from a distance, as the ghouls in the etheric know how to bounce off one human to hit another. There was never much defense against that, except to stay away from crowded areas, especially where people are violent or elitist or very agitated, like, say, at a football game. There is a war in the inner worlds between the forces of a ghoulish nature and those humans aligned to that darkness, and the millions of others that are more sympathetic to the human condition and more loving. If you're good, you'll get whacked left and right all the way. That's your karma. But it is changing now. The domination of the inner ghouls and their human allies is being broken down with every day that passes. Your silent power comes from your tenacity and your ability to endure and to proceed no matter what the odds. What makes it easier is when you begin to control your mind and not allow it to tow you around by the nose. You stay detached and you learn to let go. You have to somehow stop the mind asking questions and worrying. You have to trust and accept life as you find it and not struggle against it. When you turn negative, you turn your etheric inwards, folding in towards you. It's a protection thing, like pulling in and huddling up, waiting for an attack. This is dangerous, as adverse energy can find you. When you're loving and positive, the etheric rolls outward, and in doing so, it protects you from the incoming etheric of others. Also, when you're critical of others, you trash your power. It lets them in. The very thing that you're bitching about comes and joins you. You are part of it, and it is part of you. In your judgment of it, you own it. It is now part of your energy because you've set it in there with your emotions and feelings. You've pasted it all over your bulletin board, so to speak. In a way, you just want to become an observer of life and have no particular comment on what you see. In this way, you glide along without altering things too much, touching life only very little and not infecting reality in which you find yourself. If you walk through a mall and absolutely no one sees you, they never look at you or notice you, then you know you have your etheric greatly under control. When you gaze at the woman in the red dress, your energy goes towards her. She feels it and looks back at you. But if you can view her without any reaction, then you glide through life without tainting it, and you glide through silently. Every so often, stop where you are and stand still and blank your mind and go silent. And as you do so, you will feel your energy expanding. It races out to the far reaches of the universe. You can feel yourself pulsing, radiating outwards. You can feel that you are so much greater than what you think you are. You're an eternal pulse, and that pulse is connected to everything. You are connected to everything. Years ago, I'd take small groups of seminar participants out in the street, and in a matter of an hour or so, I'd show them how to read people passing by. Everyone can do it once they know they can. A person's emotion is etched in their face, and if they've had the same emotion for a long time, it changes the shape of their face. You soon see it. It's more than body language. It's the way the body is sculpted over time by the human personality. If a person is mean, their eyes look mean. If they're angry, you can feel it. If they're cruel, their lips go thin over time. If they're a predator, it's also on their lips. They change shape. You can imagine them biting you for a little feed. I know a man who is a slick wheeler-dealer type, and he often talks through the side of his mouth, even when there's no particular secret or deal going down. And yet now his mouth is shaped that way, as if he's whispering round corners all the time. Everything about him looks shady. His hair is black, and he puts little blonde streaks in it, which might be very nice if he were 18 years old, but he's almost 50. Talk about mutton dressed as lamb. He's very vain. Life is all about him, not other people. If you saw them push their shoulders forward from side to side as they walk, it's a way of making space for themselves and threatening others, because obviously a very important person doesn't need others getting in the way. It's usually a form of walking and showing off at the same time. They strut and glance left and right to see who is watching them. A powerful person doesn't need to show off. He or she is humble. The more powerful they are, the more humble they are. That's always the case, because if they have a silent power, they will have an intimate relationship with God. And if that is so, they are bound to be humble people. It's simple. If a person is slovenly, you can see the laziness and the indulgence of their life, which is often written not just in their attitude, which often says the world owes me a living, but also in the rolls of fat around their body. Elitism looks weird. I don't care for it much. It is often manifest in the way some hold up their chin as they walk. Observing the body language, observing the feelings, because in the end, silent power is all about feeling. It's all in the perception of it and the feelings. That is the only reliable yardstick for working out what the truth is in any given situation. The mind tries to guess what will happen next, or what is correct in any given situation. It makes it feel important when it guesses right. So the mind looks for patterns that may be repeated in the future to tell it what will happen. The horse won twice in a row last month, so we'll have £500 on it today. Oh dear. This is why I say in my books that free will is for amateurs, because free will is part of the dogmatic nature of the ego. It's the ego insisting that it is right and in charge of your life. It's the inner Nazi, really. And wasn't it free will that got you to the stoplight in time to hit the school bus? And didn't it get you married to a complete disaster? And wasn't it right there advising you when you signed up for your lousy job that's now hard to leave? Free will is the rotten karma that comes from the ego's insistence that it knows what it's doing, and that it has a right to control your life in every minute detail. There are laws that protect the ego and free will, but if you work it out, free will is a terrible handicap to you. You don't need it. What you need is accurate intuition and an accurate ability to read feelings. The way something feels is the way that it is. The way it looks or seems may not be the way it is. Free will and guesswork are a disaster. Even when the intellect is right, it isn't right for very long. Today's good guess is followed by tomorrow's stuff-up. If you start to trust in your feelings and your intuition, then bit by bit they become very powerful, and in the end you learn to obey them, even if they take you to places you don't really want to go, or if they prohibit you from doing things you might want to do. It is the higher self talking to you, not the intellect, and the higher self has an overview that the mind does not have. I went to London recently to visit a famous building that I've always wanted to see. And as I was walking there, I got very clear instructions that said, turn left. The left turn would take me away from where I wanted to go. And so I hesitated for a moment, a little frustrated. Then I walked a few steps toward where I wanted to go just to see what would happen. And I suddenly felt a sharp prickling sensation on my wrist. When that happens, it's always a warning to me. It feels like mild stinging nettles. So I gave it up and walked off in the opposite direction, and I never did go to the building that I'd intended to visit. Why did my higher self warn me off? I don't know. But over time, I've just learned to accept orders and follow whatever I'm told. I travel the world with my little computer and a suitcase, and I go from place to place. I don't really live anywhere permanently. When I get to a crossroads, I wait for my inner self to tell me, right or left. Sometimes I hear nothing, so I check into a hotel and wait. Then after a few days, I see a vision that tells me which way to go, or I get what I call a hit, which is a very strong feeling that instructs you. So you follow it. I've been doing this following along for many years now. The next day, I was walking down the Fulham Road in London, and as I passed a pub called Finch's, I heard someone call my name. I looked across the street, and there was no one on the sidewalk or in the doorway of the pub. Then I heard my name called 3 more times. Each time I looked, and there was no one there. I went up the street to get something, and then I turned back and walked into the pub. There was a man I haven't seen for 30 years. He hadn't seen me in the street or called out. I knew it was his inner mind that spoke to me, calling. I don't know if the chance encounter was for my benefit or his, but that doesn't matter. It was just another instance where I followed along. You see, you'll often never know why you end up where you do end up. But if you follow along, life will always be spontaneous and it will never be boring. Now, I'm not saying you should lead my life, drifting around. You might find it too lonely and bleak. But you can allow the silent power within you more and more influence, so you make less mistakes. You see, your power lies in what you don't do rather than what you do do. The BS you avoid is as important as the decisions you get right. A few decisive, well-planned actions are worth so much more than running around trying to do too many things at once. If you have no time in your life, it's because your mind has you as its slave. The ego is getting you to feed its every whim. And so you're up all hours of the day and night trying to keep it happy. Perhaps now it's time to stick the ego in the slammer for a bit and give yourself a rest. There's an element of silent power that allows for non-action. And the first and foremost non-action is to train yourself not to react. When all lose their head around you, you walk slow and feel out the situation. Get an accurate reading before you act. Remember, I've said before, when you don't know, don't go. Often it is fine to do nothing. And remember, retreat is a warrior's greatest weapon. It's never wrong to walk away and live to fight another day. The Rambo mentality that plows in regardless is stupid in my view. It can get you killed. Most things in life can be bypassed. That's the beauty of it. You have choices. If you're a confident person, you will find that you can allow life around you to flow in whatever way it pleases, and you can grant that liberty and freedom to others. You will not need to control or dominate their lives, and if you do so, you're weak and you become the covert Nazi. You will demand allegiance from everyone and you will seek to have power over them. You will have rules, lots of rules. It's your control over them that gives the ego the illusion of power. But in fact, the very control you insist on makes you brittle and easy to push over. Because any time your control falters, your ego will go nuts and it'll become threatened and angry, and that will make you sick. And eventually you have to let go because you're in a hospital with a tube up your nose, fighting for your life. And at that point, you don't control anything, not even your bowel movements. It all finds a balance, you know. In recent years, I've suggested to people that they try the Amazonian sacred brew, ayahuasca, which is spelled Ayahuasca. The reason I have felt it important is because Aya, as I call it, teaches you loads of lessons about silent power. It assails the ego and makes it go quiet, and it teaches you to let go. It is sometimes called the vine of death, not because anyone dies from it, but because it takes you to an ego death, a place where the ego has to let go. And once it does so, the medicine in the sacred Aya brew shows you what reality is really like. You see the magnificence of the vast universal reality that we live in. Strangely, everyone sees the same thing. It all starts off in a multicolored dome of fractal geometric patterns. It shows you that every leaf and every little thing is in fact a mathematical formula expressed in an incredible complexity. And yet, in that vast complex nature of reality, there's an utter simplicity, a gentle and wonderful connectedness in all things. Aya is really a supplement. In repressive countries like the US and Britain, they call it a drug, but it's not. Its main component is DMT, which is natural in the body, and ayahuasca feeds DMT into the pineal gland. It's legal in Brazil and other places like Switzerland, and in some countries like Holland and Canada. It's not legal, but it's not illegal either. It's in a sort of grey area. You can get it and use it, as long as you don't publicize it. Hundreds of people I know have gone to Brazil, to the temples of Aya, and they all say the same thing, that Aya changed their life and increased their perception enormously. I do know this, if you've not seen it, you haven't really lived. And if you're a spiritual teacher or healer, you need it, because everything you teach will change once you've been to an ayahuasca temple. You will see that what you know is a bit inadequate, because it's just words. It's not the real thing. And your words may not even be accurate words, often enough. Aya rewires the brain, changing the synapses, activating receptors in the brain that have laid dormant for decades. The sacred Aya brew replaces lost DMT in the pineal. You need that for perception. It is the key to extrasensory perception. The pineal gland fires DMT, dimethyltryptamine, in heavy doses twice in its life, at birth and at death. The near-death experience is thought to be a DMT release, when the brain thinks the body is dead or dying. Modern humans are missing most of their DMT. That might be due to poor diets and the distress of modern life. But the missing DMT is why depression is so prevalent in our society.